We left off the last video highlighting just a few of the Black colonies established in Sierra Leone, Africa by state chapters of the American Colonization Society. Each state was responsible for raising money and arranging transportation of its free Blacks and slaves out of America and returned them to Africa. So we identified several ships. We'll do more. We identified them by name, those that left various states in America with Blacks. But why was this even a thing? So in 1804, St. Dominic in the Caribbean would be the first, only time, honestly, on this side of the globe that slaves, with the help of free Blacks, staged a revolt against their owners and gained their independence. White colonists in America had always feared the day would come when slaves would rise up against them with the help of free Blacks. But the word spreading of what happened in the Caribbean made those fears increase to a point of desperation and self-preservation. The American Colonization Society felt a separate colony for free Blacks would ensure the paths of those free and those enslaved would never cross. So Elias B. Caldwell wasn't just a lawyer who worked at the U.S. Supreme Court. He was one of the earlier people Congressman Charles Mercer reached out to initially after finding these hidden plans. So Mercer, as I said earlier, spoke to Francis Scott Key, the author of the Star-Spangled Banner. Caldwell and Banner Boy actually worked in the same office. They both would later become a part of the managing board of the American Colonization Society. This is what he said. The more you improve the condition of these people, the more you cultivate their minds, the more miserable you make them in their present state. You give them a higher relish for those privileges which they can never attain, and turn what we intend for a blessing into a curse. That's Elias Caldwell. The American Colonization Society felt equality for Blacks would never be achieved, and they would do everything in theory, in their power, to ensure that. But another group of whites who called themselves abolitionists and did not support slavery also agreed Blacks would never be seen as equals. So the two opposing sides found something to agree on: Black removal. Most families had members on both sides of the slavery issue, as we will see in just a moment.
Two cousins stood on opposite sides of history. Charles Mercer, a politician of his time, championed the cause of Black removal, advocating for a separate future. But his cousin, Margaret Mercer, chose a different path. An ardent abolitionist, she not only freed her own slaves, but dedicated her life to education and emancipation. While he ensured ships, like the Harriet leaving Virginia, was loaded with free Blacks, made it to Africa. She saw it as an opportunity to help Blacks escape, a family divided, but found agreement in Black removal.
Virginia's chapter would get their donations in and then prepare for a ship's departure called the Harriet, carrying 130 Blacks. I was able to obtain a list of all those on board, and the ship's manifest, it just had a story of its own. So every name, age, plantation, or city each person came from, who paid for them to go, if it was something other than the ACS. Were they slaves? Were they free? Could they read? Could they write? Neither, both. One family, the Roberts family of 5, were not slaves, but opted to go voluntarily because they felt the family's small trading business in Virginia, they just would never be able to vote. They wouldn't be treated equals. So they thought going to Africa with the ACS would be a fresh start. They left a business partner behind. So once they arrived in Africa, they could possibly set up a trading business back and forth. So also on that list was Skyke Jennings, 26, from Maryland. The American Colonization Society would often mix people from different state chapters. So to fill more vessels and lower costs of the ships, in this case, the Harriet had families from North Carolina, Maryland, Virginia, kind of all over. Skyke Jennings was paid for by Mrs. Marge Mercer. If that name sounds familiar, her cousin Charles Mercer would be the one who initially found the documents for the plan of Black removal in the first place. He was the one who introduced the bill to the Virginia Assembly and got it signed by the president. Marge Mercer was a known abolitionist who ran a home that welcomed Blacks and who helped them attain freedom. Her father, John Francis Mercer, was a founding father, but as the youngest of the delegates in Philadelphia, he hated the idea of the U.S. Constitution and being what was being drafted. He, as a slave owner, thought, I'm going to leave before this thing is even voted on. I'm headed back home for help. So back to the Roberts family of 5, the ship's manifest with Joseph Roberts and his family would disembark from the Harriet in the Virginia colony. These colonies were independent of each other and governed separately. Schools, businesses would be established, local trades, markets, they all operated independently. So during this time, Joseph's brother, John Wright Roberts, entered the ministry of the Liberian Methodist Church. Later, he became a bishop. After starting as a trader, the youngest brother, Henry Roberts, studied medicine at the Berkshire Medical College in Massachusetts. Joseph Roberts continued his trading business by shipping products back to America to the partner who was left behind in Virginia. They sold items back and forth and created markets on both ends and became profitable. He was successful enough to pay for his brother's tuition, Henry, to return to Africa after Massachusetts school, and he became a physician there in Liberia. Some of these independent sites where colonies were erected in Sierra Leone were literally negotiated at gunpoint. Captain Stockton of the ship the Nautilus would hold his pistol to the head of King Zolo Duma when he refused to sell his property to the American Colonization Society and said, negotiate or you will become this colony's first victim. Joseph Jenkins Roberts became a colony sheriff, negotiating peace between the native tribes and the new incoming colonies. And he would soon bring together colonies, all of them together under a united colony. So at that point, Joseph Jenkins Roberts had become someone who was discarded by America, who would fight for the independence of these colonies, unify them, and only to become the first Black president of a new nation called Liberia. So to this day, its capital city, Monrovia, named after the American president who secretly funded the removal with tax dollars. It's just a reminder of a time America worked to remove its blacks in order to preserve its slavery of those who remained. Also on board the vessel was with Sky Key Jennings and Joseph Jenkins Roberts and his family. Born into Richmond, Virginia, was a named James Spriggs Payne. He would become the fourth president of Liberia. Springs Payne Airport in Monrovia is named after him. Joseph Jenkins Roberts International Airport is named in his honor. The country's national holiday, March 15th, is Joseph Jenkins Roberts' birthday. We are the African diaspora. The Harriet had a ship's manifest. I'll show that again. On that manifest told very many stories. These were the stories that should have been cultivated in a country called America. Instead, through legislation at the state level in Virginia, through legislation that would ultimately be signed, voted on by the Congress in Washington, D.C., that legislation that would ultimately be signed by the President of the United States, James Monroe, would facilitate the creation of the American Colonization Society, which supported removing blacks that were free for fear they would influence those who were enslaved and ruin the whole slave industry. So the idea that you would create colonies in Africa just to get them out and preserve that slave institution is fascinating. These are the first stories of colonies for blacks being erected on behalf of America. It was not going to be the last. You're going to be surprised.